صباح الخير. بليز تفضلوا، وبشكر حضوركم اليوم للبنان ووتر فورم. هيدا مشروع بلشناه مع اوكسفام من شي 3 سنين. اجيت لما عبد الصمد كان عندها فكرة، وقعدنا سوا وافتكرنا كيف بدنا نقدم أفكار كويسة للحوكمة بقطاع المي، نساعد الحوكمة بقطاع المي بلبنان. ورحنا وجينا وجلنا كتير وطلعنا أفكار، وعملنا أول جلسة بال2016. عصرنا كتير وقت وعملنا جهد رهيب، ولهيدا يعني كمان في شكر كبير لأوكسفام وللما عبد الصمد فيه، ولكل اللي اشتغلوا من IFI وقتها، وعطونا وقت انطلاقة كتير كويسة لنقدر نكمل. اللي ساعدنا كتير كمان الدعم المادي اللي اجى من الEU. بقى وقتها كملنا المشوار وجينا قطعت 2 سنين ما قدرنا نأمن الفندنج الكافي، ووصلنا لليوم. واليوم بعد جهد كبير مضني كمان بلشنا فيه مع لما، وكملنا مع جهاد وبشير، وأهم شيء كان عنا دعمنا من سالي أبي خليل من أوكسفام. هيدا عطانا الدعم الكبير. ومقبيله نحن هون IFI كان عنا فريق كتير اشتغل على مدى، هلا بتشوف يعني عم تشوفوا النتائج. بحب اشكرهم شخص لأنه للجهد اللي عملوه والتعب اللي مرقوا فيه بينشكروا له. في عنا من IFI في ياسمين الأمين، بحب وجه لها شكر. رنا الحاج من الكوميونيكيشنز تيم عنا في 3 أشخاص اشتغلوا around the clock مثل ما بيقولوا: سوزان الحصري، سميرة مكي، ومحمد تمراوي. هلا محمد تلاقوه عم بيبرم هون بيوت بيناتنا، مش تقريبا مسؤول عن كل شيء بالأوضة. في وديان الشعار كمان ساعدتنا باللوجيستكس لنقدر ندخل. اليوم عنا 3 بانلز برأينا كتير مفيدين ومجديين، وبيساعدونا نحط تصور ونقدر نساعد بعض، يعني ما تكون حفلة نق وحفلة اتهامات. والمهم عنا كتير انه نقدر ناخد شيء من هالقعدة، مش بس نحكي ونمشي. مشان هيك يعني كتير أنا بشكر حضور المدراء العامين، يعني 4 عنا موجودين هون، والوزارة كمان. هيدي شهادة إلنا وشهادة إلهم أكتر بعد. بقى هيدي بحب أشكرهم فيها، وأشكر حضوركم وتعطونا وقتكم اليوم. وبليز القصة حطينا بانل ديسكشن لنشارك، لنقدر ناخد ونعطي مع بعض. بقى في أسئلة ورح يكون في ميكروفونات بين شغالة حتى نقدر نشارك بأسئلة وباستيضاحات. وقبل ما انهي واعزم البانلست عنا، بليز بحب اقول شغله في ترجمه شغاله، واذا في لا احد حاله محشور في عنا اوفر فلو اريا برا كمان اللاحقين اللايف ستريمينج الايفنت عنا هون. بحب انهي هلا واعزم دكتور طارق متري بليز لكلمه ترحيب.
صباح الخير. I'm going to say a few words in English, then move into Arabic. I'm a little confused about the working language of this conference. I would like to welcome you on behalf of Isam Faris Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs. And let me commend the work that the Lebanon Water Forum has been doing. The initiative is Oxfam's and our institute. It's a collaborative effort. This is a tradition that we try to keep in this institute, try to collaborate with as many partners as we can. I'd like also to thank all those who support this forum, European Union, but also members of a consortium H2O, Norwegian Refugee Council, World Vision International, and Gruppo di Volontario Civile. I'm pleased to welcome you here because this is an exercise, if I may call it this way. أهلا وسهلا. This is an exercise that we euphemistically call a policy dialogue. I say euphemistically because sometimes it's not dialogue, it's a succession of monologues, sometimes it's a polemical exercise, and it's not always about policy. It's about politics as well. But let's hope that this meeting today will be strict to sensu a policy dialogue. Now, why are we interested in policy dialogues? This is our main mission. Our institute has been created to act as a translator, mediator, bridge builder, you name it, between, now I'm going to use a very pompous language, those who produce knowledge, the academics, and policymakers. And you know, these are two communities of people that often turn their backs to each other, ignore each other, and at times look down at each other. Academics are so absorbed in their own research, they think they're serving humanity by the sheer fact that they publish in journal articles. And policymakers think that they know what is best, what public good commands, and all they need is a few figures from experts that would help them confirm the policies they have opted for. So bringing those two together is not very easy. And it's even more difficult in a country like Lebanon, where a distinction has to be made between policymakers and decision makers. Very often decision makers are, and I can testify to this from my own life experience, often decision makers are not so interested in policies. But there are people in this country, senior civil servants such as Mudara Muassasat al-Miyah that we have with us, that are more interested in policies and making sure that those policies are implementable and are implemented. I know in the Council of Ministers makes decisions, and then if someone raises the question of what policy do we have, he or she is dismissed for being academic. So we need to involve both partners in the policy conversation, but that's not enough. You need a third partner, that is those who influence opinion makers. I don't know how many journalists that are here, but we try to engage journalists in our policy discussions. But there are also people that influence public opinion that work in civil society organizations, in international organizations, in embassies, and in this country, you know, politicians lend their ears to what the internationals have to tell them. Not only in times of expecting funds, such as all the atmosphere and the expectations created around CEDR, but in normal conditions of our political life, those people are listened to. But what makes the work around policy effective is involves a series of conditions. I'm not going to list them, but I think language is important, not just التحدث بالعربية عوض استخدام الإنجليزية في كل المناسبات. It's not just about the language, it's about the language in the broad sense of the word. The less jargon there is, the less highly technical journal article languages we use, the more we speak to those who make decisions and those who make policies. Timeliness is important. Sometimes policy dialogues are premature and therefore they fall on deaf ears. Sometimes they come so late that they hardly influence anybody. And I hope that the conversations you will have around water today are timely conversations. تحدثت عن الفرق بين shifting to Arabic. تحدثت عن الفرق بين متخذي القرارات وصناع السياسات. ولا يخفى على أحد منا أن السياسيين أن متخذي القرارات وهذا توصيف لهم ليس حكما قيميا، توصيف لهم أن هؤلاء الناس محكومون بحسابات فئوية طائفية بمصالح أحزابهم والجهات التي يمثلون أو يزعمون أنهم يمثلونها. وهذا ما يظهر في القرارات التي تؤخذ في مجلس الوزراء أو على مستويات أخرى من أجهزة الدولة اللبنانية. أما النقاش في السياسات العامة فيحررنا ولو قليلا ولو جزئيا من هذا الأسر الطائفي، الأسر الحزبي، أسر تغليب الولاء على الجدارة. وسوف نرى كيف يمتحن لبنان في هذا عند التعيينات الإدارية. هل ستغلب الجدارة على الولاء أم أن الولاء السياسي سيغلب معايير الجدارة؟ النقاش السياسي نقاش حول السياسات العامة بمعزل عن السياسة بوصفها صراعا على السلطة أو تقاسما للسلطة. الحوار في أمر السياسات العامة يحررنا بعض الشيء، وأرجو أن يكون حوارنا اليوم بهذه الروح المتحررة من حسابات السياسيين. بطبيعة الحال المواضيع التي ستطرحونها في جلساتكم اليوم هي مواضيع راهنة وبالغة الحساسية. هناك سياسات وضعت، هناك خطط، اللبنانيون يستسيغون عبارة استراتيجية، خطط استراتيجية أقرت، هناك مشاريع قوانين بعضها ينام في أدراج المجلس النيابي ثم يصحو ثم ينام مجددا ولأسباب لا يعلمها إلا الله، لكن سوف تتناقشون في هذا من زاوية حرصكم على الخير العام والمياه والحفاظ على ثروة لبنان المائية ومنع إهدارها. هو خير عام لا يختلف اثنان، فالمياه هي مياه اللبنانيين، أكانوا مسلمين أم مسيحيين، سنة أم شيعة، أكانوا من هذا الحزب أو ذاك. شأنهم شأن رغيف الخبز الذي لا طائفة له ولا حزب ولا شيء مثل ذلك. ثم أن المواضيع الأخرى التي رأيت أنكم ستبحثون فيها هي قابلة للمعالجة من خارج السياسة بمعنى الصراع على السلطة، مثل أولويات الاستثمار. أنا أعرف أن نقاشا قبل سادر وهو دائر الآن بين لبنان والجهات المانحة حول أولويات الاستثمار، وهناك ميل عند اللبنانيين لأسباب تتعلق بأهمية تنشيط الاقتصاد اللبناني إلى إعطاء الاستثمار في البنى التحتية أولوية على حساب الاستثمار بالأشخاص وبالبرامج وبالخطط. وأعرف أن سجالات قامت حين قررت جهات دولية أن تقدم هبة مخصصة لإصلاح الحوكمة مثلا في إحدى الإدارات، فقيل أن هذا يعني مال يصرف في غير موضعه. فأعتقد أنكم ستبحثون قضية شائكة مثل هذه، وآمل أن تخرجوا بتوصية تساعد منتدى المياه الفورم بأن يواصل عمله بتركيز أكبر على المشكلات التي نواجهها في واقعنا الحاضر. بطبيعة الحال في كل نقاش حول الاستثمار يطرح علينا السؤال حول منطلقات توظيف الأموال. هل نحن نخضع، وتعرفون الكثيرين في لبنان يقولون هذا القول، نخضع لإملاءات الجهات المانحة، أم أننا نحن نضع أولوياتنا ونحاول إقناع الجهات المانحة بهذه الأولويات؟ لا أعرف أين صرنا في موضوع المياه على الأقل، وأحسب أنكم ستتناقشون في هذا. أطلت ما فيه الكفاية. أهلا وسهلا بكم، أتمنى لكم يوم عمل مثمر.
Thank you, Dr. Mitri. I'd like to welcome on the podium Ms. Sally Abi Khalil, Director of Oxfam, Lebanon.
صباح الخير. أنا رح أحكي بالإنجليزي. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Let me begin by thanking the Ministry of Energy and Water, Her Excellency Ms. Nada Bustani, represented here today by Ms. Suzy Hwayek, as well as the European Union's Ambassador to Lebanon, Ms. Christina Lawson, represented here today by Mr. Raim Neeland, for your continuous support and partnership of this event. I would also like to thank the entire team of the Issam Fares Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs for all your hard work, your support in making this happen, and most importantly, for your trust in this partnership that started several years ago. Finally, it's important to also thank our consortium partners of the H2All Consortium, NRC, GVC, and World Vision, where the Lebanon Water Forum this year is very much an integral part of this activity and is supported by the EU Madad Fund as well. The Water Forum, as Dr. Faraj Allah stated, the idea of it started several years ago, where colleagues at Oxfam approached the Institute, because we very much see eye to eye with the Institute of how we want to really be actors in playing a role in influencing public policy and dialogue, and to play a convening role on the issues most pertinent to Lebanon. Water, of course, is one of those integral topics. So we are very happy that that the successes of the first Water Forum can now be built on in this year's event as well, and to really have the tough and serious dialogue and conversations with the key actors and stakeholders, from the ministry to the water authorities to academics and decision makers and civil society. And to work together on some of, hopefully, the key outcomes and recommendations of this event as we move forward. Lebanon is very much at a crossroads. We are faced by many challenges, but also many opportunities to overcome them. As a middle-income and often fragile country, Lebanon has hosted the largest number of refugees per capita in the world. since the onset of the Syria crisis in 2011. The burden on host communities has increased, and the quality of life for refugees has continued to decline. All of the panelists that you will hear today will be bringing their experience and expertise to generate discussions on how we can make the provision of water to all communities in the country accessible, affordable, and efficient. By exploring water governance issues in Lebanon and its interlinkages to institutional frameworks, investments, and strategies in the water sector. Today, we need to challenge ourselves in our ways and in our thinking. How can we, as ministries, the donor communities, technical experts, water establishment and authorities, local and international actors, and academia to do more individually and collectively to ensure the quality of water service provisions to address decades-long of obstacles for Lebanese and more recently Syrian refugees from Syria? I am hopeful that our newly formed government drive to tackle many of the long-standing issues that have impeded the country's growth will bear fruit. I am equally hopeful of the international community's continued commitment to support Lebanon, as demonstrated last week in the Brussels III conference and last year at the Cedr conference as well. Finally, I'm inspired by all of you here today. We hear of various forms of fatigue, be it from the government, the donor community, and the host community, to name just a few. But seeing you all here today and your commitment to being here with us and to take part of this second edition of the Lebanon Water Forum is really the biggest indication that there is still a strong motivation and a diverse group of individuals that are pushing for change and working hard for change in support of people's basic right to right to basic services in a transparent and consistent and accountable manner. And finally, I would also like to thank our panelists here today who have volunteered kindly their time to be with us and to really wish everyone here a great working day, of one of dialogue and debate, to challenge ourselves and hopefully to come out with recommendations that we can all individually and collectively build on and work towards in the future. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Sally. We also truly appreciate the partnership that we have with Oxfam. It goes beyond just this Lebanon Water Forum. It transcends several programs that we work with on policy, and it's been a real pleasure working with you so far, and we hope that this will continue into the future. We have next, if I'd like to welcome Mr. Ryan Nyland, Head of Section for Governance, Social Development, and Civil Society at the European Delegation to Lebanon. Please, sir.
Good morning to all of you, dear representative of the Minister of Energy and Water, directors of the Institute, Issam Faris, and also of Oxfam, general directors of the water establishments, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here. It's an important day. It's the day of World Water Day, and the fact that we have a day, World Water Day, indicates that these are important issues. Water scarcity, governance of water, service delivery in the region here are very important topics. Topics that can, if we not address them, give rise to social instability. In Lebanon, it's equally the case. So taking time on a yearly basis, forming debates, having debates, finding the right partners, and continuing to put the issue of water governance on the agenda is extremely urgent, and we need to continue to do this. I'm happy to highlight a few of the perspectives as from the European Union we see the sector and also moving forward. Obviously, we are a big donor to the sector, so able to guide you also in our opinions. But let me say I'm happy to be here and to play our part. I think it's important also to acknowledge the contributions of our donors, of our partners, Oxfam, and the ministry. Unfortunately, today we're still witnessing increased reports about the problems that we are facing in the sector. Inadequate supply of public networks, heavy environmental impacts of untreated water, wastewater, actually released in the sea and in rivers. And time is basically not on our side. The discussion in the media about the pollution of the Litani River and the public concern about possible impacts on health is just one of the issues of debate that is ongoing in this country and that needs to be addressed quickly and sustainably. Moreover, the current regional context that we are all facing here of the Syrian crisis is obviously not helping us in this situation. It should always be said, and that's what the European Union always acknowledges, the fact that Lebanon is hosting this large number of refugees, and that has, of course, exacerbated the pre-existing problems in the sector. And that's what we will continue to do. But the situation that we are facing obviously requires action in that respect. Since the last Lebanese Water Forum, we welcomed an important shift in the sectorial debate. More and more actors and public officials are now taking not only the need for new infrastructure, but also the need for real service delivery, proper and reliable service delivery, into account. It's evident that the sustainability of services should pass through the reinforcement of the capacities of the water establishments. Various initiatives of technical assistance have been launched, but the results achieved so far are not always up to expectations. This is mainly related to the chronic problem of water establishment, lack of staff, lack of adequate staff, lack of trained staff, lack of competent staff. And obviously, going forward in the country with, and it was mentioned, initiatives in the context of Celebrant, Capital Investment Plan, this is a critical issue that obviously you're also facing in the water sector. But let me also stress another point with regards to the water sector. This sector should find the right space in the national dialogue. The wastewater treatment problem has become very prominent in the media in the last few years. However, we do not think that it has found yet the right consideration that's at an institutional level and that adequate strategic planning is currently in place. For this purpose, the need to study and revise, for instance, tariffs to assure that the sector will be sustainable and can stand on its own legs in the medium term, for us, is also evident. Ladies and gentlemen, we recognize the difficulties that the actors in the sector are facing to guarantee adequate levels of services. We believe that their burden could be probably eased by improving the dialogue between public actors and with the citizens. So obviously, being here today, this adds to this initiative. A more constructive dialogue based on sharing of data and vision for long-term improvement, but also sharing the efforts and the results achieved up to date would improve accountability towards citizens and consequently their trust and support towards a long journey of reform in this sector. Building the trust between public institutions and citizens is key for the EU that has been financing various interventions and reinforced capacities in the sector over the last years. We consider that most of the elements that should be addressed to tackle the problems in the sector are already presented in the national strategy published in 2012, but unfortunately, up to now, little progress has been made, even if large amounts of international funds have been available to the sector. Since the beginning of the crisis, the Syrian crisis, the European Union, together with the European member states and the European international financial institutions, have supported the sector with grants, with loans, grants for more than 900 million euro. And in that sense, lots of Lebanese, I have figures here telling me around 900,000 Lebanese and 200,000 Syrian refugees have benefited from all these actions to have access to an improved infrastructure. The additional demand of services created by the refugee population in Lebanon should, however, not be overlooked. As actors responding to humanitarian principles, we should assure that refugees can access a minimum level that meets their needs, but also guarantees their dignity. Wherever possible, and without implying that this would lead to the stabilization of the refugee population here in Lebanon, we believe that the Lebanese public service providers should properly support and be remunerated for this service delivery. Wherever this is not possible, humanitarian actors should step in. To reduce possible tensions between local citizens and refugees, we believe in the need of targeted interventions in municipalities to make sure that they are able to deal with the high influx of the refugees. These interventions are properly balanced by the large support programs that the EU and other donors are already financing in the sector and are planning to commit for supporting under the context of the Lebanese Capital Investment Plan. I referred to that. Since last year, many changes have happened in the sector with the nomination of the new general directors since last April and the recent appointments and, of course, the new government in place. We are expecting new energy and dynamism in the sector and a clear commitment for moving forward. Let me assure you today that the EU remains committed to a stable and a reliable long-term partner, as a long-term partner to Lebanon in this process of reform, and that we will accompany Lebanon in the Capital Investment Plan. For this purpose, a new project financed by the EU is under preparation together with AFD, Agence Française pour le Développement, for providing a robust technical assistance to the reform in the sector. A reform process that should be led by the Ministry of Energy and Water and should assure that the same vision and the same objectives are shared and owned by all the actors, including municipalities and citizens. As mentioned earlier, trust, collaboration and dialogue are the key words for solving the problems in this sector. And we are therefore really grateful to Oxfam and to all of you involved in the H2All consortium for promoting this dialogue today and for organizing this forum. Let us leave this conference today with the peace of mind that Lebanon's water resources are in your good hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neelan. I would like next to welcome the representative of Her Excellency, the Minister of Energy and Water, Nada Bastani, Ms. Susie Hwayik. She has a terrible sore throat. So I'm begging your pardon before she comes up here, and please bear with her. Susie, come up, please.
Good morning, everyone. I'm not going to talk much because I can't talk much. Just a few words. First of all, I'd like to thank the Director Generals for being with us today. I'd like to thank all of you because I'm really very happy that the main stakeholders of the water sector are with us today. I'd like to thank Oxfam and the Institute of Haysam Faris, especially Dr. Nadim Farajallah, Mrs. Sally, and Ms. Lama Abdussamad, who is not present with us today, but who was behind all of this idea. Just two important ideas I'm gonna talk about. This forum is a good start, if you want, for a new phase in the water sector. A new phase with new Director Generals who are very active, very dynamic, very ambitious, and a new phase with a new Minister whom I'm representing today, Mrs. Nada Bussani Khouri, who also is a very active minister and a very ambitious one. A lot is to be made in the water sector, and we have lots of targets, lots of objectives, and I would invite you all to help the ministry and the water establishments in achieving these goals. The forum today is a sample or a start of a communication phase in the water sector. I invite for more communication. Our doors are open for dialogue, for debate. We will start it here. We will continue it at the ministry and at the water establishments. And such communication fora will take place during this year in the ministry, and you will be invited to participate when the time comes. One other important idea is that we do have a water strategy at the ministry. We are starting to update it soon, and I would like us all to participate and to give our opinion in the update and what needs to be in the priorities, top-down or bottom-up, doesn't matter as long as it's a priority and as long as the water reaches the citizens and as long as it's clean, as long as wastewater is collected, and etc. So we will be holding such fora at the ministry, and I hope that next year, in next year's Lebanon Water Forum, we will be presenting our updated national water sector strategy in the presence of all of you and in the presence of much more audience. And that's it. I will not speak more. Please stay with us. I will be in session number 2, as well as the Director Generals will be in the first session to hear more about the ministry, more about what we want to do, and more about our strategies and investment plans. Thank you, and have a nice day and a fruitful forum.
I was remiss in saying a little thing when we were preparing for this year's forum. We went to Susie's office and we met with her, and it was through her graciousness and her willingness to share the ministry's offices, good offices, and goodwill that we ended up here with a partnership of the ministry. And this, thank you so much for that, Susie, and we really appreciate your support. I missed that coming in. Before we close this opening session, we have our keynote speaker today, Mr. Olivier Rey, the regional director of the Agence Française de Développement, and he's going to sort of give us a tour de force on the water sector here and around, and his experiences, I guess. Olivier, please.
Sabah khair, bonjour à tous. Thank you very much to the Sam Ferris Institute and Oxfam for this invitation. As you may know, the French Development Agency has been active in the water sector in Lebanon for several decades, and water is a theme that is very dear to us. And as you will see from this speech, public dialogue, public policy dialogue is something we firmly believe in, not only in Lebanon, but throughout the world. Our experience in 90 countries throughout the world, and the experience of France, is that in this public policy dialogue, you probably find 90% of the ingredients for the public policy to be performant in the long term. And so thank you for hosting this very important day. Let me start by a few figures, just to take stock of where we stand today. And I think we are all aware of the situation, but just a few figures remind us of where we are. According to the capital investment program of the government, 71% of domestic wastewater is rejected in the natural environment without any form of treatment. That's over 300 million cubic meters of contaminated wastewater that ends up either in the aquifer, and we know Lebanon's predominantly karstic soil surfaces, or directly in the Mediterranean. So we're faced with a sad paradox. While Lebanon is actually one of the few countries in the region which is very rich in the water resource, up to 70% of natural water sources in Lebanon are infected, contaminated by bacteria. As the Minister of Environment recently told me, we're really facing an ecological disaster in the making. And that made me think of the book Collapse. I don't know if you've read it, by Jared Diamond. It's an interesting book, and its subtitle is interesting as well. It says, the subtitle is How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed. And it tells the story of how civilizations in history have committed effectively collective suicide by destroying their natural habitat. And the interesting thing I take from this book is that there's a problem of non-reversibility. When you reach a point of no return, you might realize that you're committing suicide, but it's too late. The suicide has already been committed. And we know the strong inertias when it comes to environmental degradation. Just take the example of salination of the aquifers due to pumping, unauthorized pumping. There's no coming back once the aquifer is salinized, or at least not in the next 2, 3, 4, 500 years. And that should be a source of concern. So we're not only facing a durable, lasting environmental cost and catastrophe, but there's also a health catastrophe and a health cost due to waterborne diseases. According to a recent AUB study, 80% of Lebanese tap water contains fecal bacteria. So we're seeing the risk, again, of seeing disease such as cholera come back to Lebanon. And let's imagine the environmental and the health costs that are linked to these waterborne diseases. More worrying still, I was told recently that research shows that the country's rivers are carrying high quantities of tuberculosis multi-resistant bacteria, partly because of the drugs that are not treated and that end up in the rivers. Now, that's a major health crisis in the making. So these are the environmental and health costs, but all of this carries a huge economic cost as well. And I'll quote one of your colleagues from the Sam Faris Institute when he recalled that 3/4 of a Lebanese household water budget is today directed to private suppliers. So this the dysfunctionality of water service provision has a high economic impact on Lebanese citizens of all parts of the country. But there are also indirect economic and social costs. There was a conference this week, I believe, or last week, on sustainable tourism, about the potential of tourism for growth and employment in the region. The Kadisha Valley, which is a source of revenue in terms of tourism for the years to come, risks losing its UNESCO label just because it doesn't have proper wastewater treatment. So the ripple effects are important, whether you look at the environmental crisis per se, the health effects, or the economic effects of this crisis. These figures, if the reason I quote them is that they're very surprising when they're put in perspective of Lebanon's economic and revenue level. We're in a middle-income country of the upper tranche. And these sorts of figures we find in these developed countries in which we work throughout the world. So there's a paradox. It really shows, what this shows to me is that Lebanon can do much better, and we can collectively do much better. Lebanon has the human resources, there is the quality personnel, and we're in AUB, a world-class university that trains professionals from the different sectors that we need, whether governance, management, engineering, obviously environmental sciences. The human capital is there. Lebanon also has the technical know-how, it has the funding, it has the support of the international community. So this equation is present, we can do much better. Where does the solution lie? Well, I think the first speeches have shown that it lies in the collective action of the community of men and women that are actually sitting in this room. The Ministry of Water and Energy, obviously, the water establishments that are key elements of the chain, but also municipalities, parliamentarians, the academic community, international donors, civil society. So the key lies in the collective action capacity of this collective of donor. So the question then becomes, how do you generate collective action between this range of experimented individuals? Well, first, I think we need to believe firmly that we can do it, which means breaking the confidence crisis that we have with respect to public policy in Lebanon. We know where it comes from, but until we rebuild confidence in the capacity for public policy in Lebanon, we won't be able to break the cycles. And we need to generate trust between the actors that are fundamentally struggling on the same challenges. Secondly, we need to learn from our mistakes and do so together. And I'll come back to the second point as well. And thirdly, we need to be reading from the same book to make our reading of the problems converge. And that's fundamental to design the scenarios for the public policy decision makers to do their decision job. So how do we tackle the confidence crisis? Lebanese citizens, in many ways, are disillusioned with the capacity of the state to provide public services. This has generated two vicious circles in my reading. First, because they don't believe in the possibility of an efficient management of water and wastewater sector, Lebanese citizens are not willing to pay for its improvement, which they deem illusory because they've been waiting for decades for it, and because their water bill is already quite substantive, because they're paying twice the price. What this does is that it prevents water establishments and the ministry from generating the necessary revenue needed to maintain quality human resources and quality infrastructure, which is one of the causes for poor service delivery. So how do you break that cycle? There's a solution to that. International aid has been designed to plug financing gaps at critical moments of the development process. That's what I'm paid for. So there is a possibility to work together to plug that gap, but what this improves is that what this means is that we need quick improvement of service delivery, quick progress on the revenue collection in order for that gap not to last forever. And I insist on the quick. Times matters if it's a question of rebuilding confidence and using international aid only in a small moment where you need to plug the gap of financing. Obviously, international aid doesn't have the ambition of staying in Lebanon for another century. International aid only makes sense as a temporary financing solution to a financial gap. And I insist on time because AFD's experience in Lebanon has been one of successes and failures. One of the failures has been the time issue. I inaugurated last year with the minister the wastewater treatment plants of Sheka and Batroun. So that's a good sign if you look at the part of the glass that's half full. But it took us 20 years to get them operational. 20 years. It was even before AFD started operating in Lebanon that the French Ministry of Finance put money at the disposal of the Lebanese states to invest in these two treatment plants. That was 1998 or 1999. The two wastewater treatment plants were inaugurated in 2008. But it took another 10 years for the networks to actually be plugged into the station so they could be operational. And so time matters, and we can't replicate that sort of timeline. Second vicious circle is the fact that Lebanese citizens have lost trust in the state's capacity to deliver reliable services means that they've turned to private actors to meet some of the most basic needs, such as delivering drinking water. So that has So it's a relevant short-term solution, but that has paved the way to entrench economic interests for the non-performance of public policy. And that can generate resistance to change, and this is very worrying. And water obviously is not the only sector concerned when it comes to alternative service providers having an interest in continuing to provide for a ill-delivering public service. So these two vicious circles need to be broken, and I'm convinced that Lebanon can do so and is not condemned to live the collapse scenario that I was mentioning in my introduction, with a triple environmental, health, and economic catastrophes that are linked to it. And why is that? As several speakers before, I see a series of opportunities and reasons to hope in the period that's opening today. Reasons to hope because some of that structural change can happen. The first is that the international community, through the said conference, has shown it is willing to support Lebanon in this transition phase, both on the reform agenda and on the financing dimension of the equation. There's a welcome debate on the conference, on the CIP, and that's great. Everything is not perfect, and there's a lot of work to be done on the CIP and on the reform agenda. But what CED has created is a platform to engage that discussion, for this debate to happen between public policy makers and citizens, academia, on what's a priority, what are the reforms that are needed. So first reason to hope, there's a strong international support for that reform agenda. Secondly, I see a lot of lucidity in the government and the government declaration on the challenges ahead and the roadmap for reform. The long-awaited government has taken a very strong declaration and has named the government a government at work. And indeed, there's a lot of work to be done. So that's why I'm looking forward to work with Minister Boustany, the different actors of the water and wastewater ecosystem, to bring about this structural change and these reforms. Minister Boustany has asked us to work on a memorandum of understanding, as one that is being discussed on the energy side, on water and wastewater. And we're pretty keen to engage on an MOU. Why? Because it creates this roadmap and this possibility for expectations to converge on the steps ahead. Third, we haven't only seen words and declarations, we've started seeing acts. The newly appointed ministers that I've seen so far have clearly a strong understanding that they will be judged on acts and results and not merely on their discourse. The appointment of the new directors of the water establishments is also a signal of new dynamism that will be injected in each of these establishments. They will be saying it better, much better than I could today, but they've already started putting acts on the table. And I have to say, I have been quite impressed on some of the actions that have been delivered in the last few months by the water establishments. So they already have a track record on which we can build. Fourth reason to hope, civil society is also voicing its concern. We know that the new generation of Lebanese will not accept what previous generations have endured, and the awareness on environmental issues has been increasing. Parliamentarians as well, in the new parliament, have engaged in the public policy and some of the technical issues that we're dealing with today. And that's relatively new, or at least I see more parliamentarians engaging in that policy debate. The press is much more interested in environmental issues than in the past, and that's fundamental for the pedagogical element of public policy. And finally, academia is willing to engage in that discussion and to bring forward the evidence bases that we need for sound public policy. Final reason to hope, donors themselves are determined to build on past successes and failures in the sector. We need to have our own critical self-criticism on what's been done in the past, and we have plenty of experience to learn from. The success of the said conference is fundamental for the credibility both of the Lebanese government and of the international community. There can be no complacency, neither on behalf of the government nor on behalf of the donor community, and at least I can speak for the French Development Agency, AFD will be the demanding partner that Lebanon deserves, that the public authorities in Lebanon deserve, and that the citizens of Lebanon deserve. You know about the Gilets jaunes crisis in the streets of Paris. There's a lot of challenge on the way the French state uses the French taxpayers' money. And so I will be supervised on the actual impact on any project that I implement, that I contribute to finance here in Lebanon. A few months ago, I was in Paris with all the directors, AFD directors who are serving in different parts of the world. And our Minister of Finance used this example of the Gilets jaunes, saying, you are responsible for the use of French taxpayers' money. I ask of you to stop any project for which you're not convinced that you are providing quick and efficient impact on the ground. And so I will follow this to the word. So I owe this to French taxpayers, but I also owe this to Lebanese taxpayers. Many of the investments that are done here are done in the form of loans. Loans make a lot of sense when there's a sustainable service delivery and revenue collection capacity in the long run. But you need to have that revenue collection ultimately. And so we owe this to French taxpayers' money as far as AFD is concerned, and Lebanese taxpayers who are not willing to accept more debt for Lebanon if it doesn't provide quality service and revenue generation in the years to come. We also, I said that we have a lot of experiences to learn from. We know now the conditions for success, and in that respect, I'm drawing from a fantastic study that was made by Hydro-Conseil just a few years ago on 10 years of experience of investment in the wastewater sector in Lebanon. And this study, which is available, happy to share it again, showed that we need a real change of paradigm. First, from a context of defiance to a context of trust and collective action between the state and the citizen, within the state between the different actors of the ecosystem, and between the donors. And we owe this to Lebanon as well. And there has been, over the last few weeks and months, a lot of work with our colleagues from the European Commission and other partners on how we can bring to Lebanon a collective donor endeavor to accompany the sector, and perhaps Michele later on in the day can say a little more about it. So that's the first shift of paradigm. The second, from a top-down quantitative approach when it comes to water delivery and wastewater delivery, to a service-based approach that puts the citizen and the consumer at the center. What matters is not the number of dams or wastewater plants that are financed, it's the quality of end service to consumers and citizens that is delivered. Third paradigm shift, from an infrastructure-heavy and capital-heavy investment program to durable investments. And durable has two senses in that respect. First, each investment needs to be environmentally sustainable. And I think there's a big stake, which is common to the donor community and the government, of greening the CIP. What I mean by greening the CIP is looking at each of the projects and ensuring that we have the very latest up-to-date technology that provides cost effectiveness, but also the best environmentally friendly solutions. Some of the projects that are today in the CIP were conceived several years ago. So we're not sure that they have the state-of-the-art technology. So we need to have that second look together to provide Lebanon state-of-the-art, sustainable, environmentally sustainable technologies. One example of this is the reed bed filter projects that we have in Bshareh and the environmental and in the region. These are technologies that are fit for purpose. They're adapted to mountainous landscape. And we believe that there's potential for these technologies to be present in other parts of the country. The second twist when I say that we need durable investments is the economic sustainability of the investments, and that was referred to by Ryan earlier. We cannot invest in infrastructure that can't be maintained just because the maintenance cost is too high. Finally, we need the last paradigm shift that we've identified is we need to move from a situation where many actors attempt to do everything at once, which means that they end up failing to do the whole scope of their missions, to a situation where the responsibilities for the chain of effect are clearly outlined, and each actor is accountable for the performance it delivers in the link for which it is responsible in the chain. And that's why there was a lot of insistence for the Water Code to be ratified. The Water Code has been in discussion with experts over 15 years, I believe. It was high time that we clarify the institutional setup because in the meantime, that generates an infrastructure that's not managed just because we don't know who's in charge of maintaining it. That problem has been identified a long time ago. The Water Code has the objective, one of the objectives is to clarify the chain of responsibilities. So the institutional framework on which the ministry is working needs to reflect that change of paradigm towards more sustainable, durable investments and that service delivery approach. I'll finish by insisting on the last condition for success, which is the fact that we need to be reading from the same book and have a sustained, mature dialogue between the different actors in order to succeed. And this is why I was so enthusiastic to come be present at this policy dialogue. It's that sort of policy dialogue that will generate a convergence in the analysis of the challenges, of the scenarios for action, to let the policy makers and the decision makers ultimately make their decisions on the basis of a collectively generated diagnosis and solutions. The international donor community can facilitate this dialogue. We can, and AFD, because we fundamentally believe in this approach, is willing to fund it as well. It needs to be sustained. I understood that there was a gap in the water forums for lack of financing. This is something that typically the project, the technical assistance package to accompany reform can finance in the years to come. We've been discussing with Minister Boustany the idea of having an observatory for that sort of dialogue and discussion to happen over a long period of time. If every actor does its part of the job, including Lebanese citizens, we can deliver the sort of structural change we need. And I'll just conclude on Lebanese citizens. We need citizens that are informed, hence the implication of the academic community and the press, hence the public policy dialogue under the leadership of the ministry and the minister. We need citizens to be challenging, towards their authorities. We need citizens to be challenging to the donor community. We also need citizens to be responsible, ultimately to go to the end of that responsibility, which means paying their bill. And that is something I believe that is possible today because we have a much more informed public opinion and we have the channels of discussion and information that we need. So that's the agenda that I see for the years to come based on our decade-long experience here in Lebanon. But all of the material of the content of the public policy will be generated by the community of actors which is in the room. The donor community is there to accompany endogenous processes. I have seen no development process that has been kickstarted, sparked, and sustained from the outside. I'm a foreigner in Lebanon. I will be out of the country in a few years. My job is to accompany processes that are owned, sparked, and sustained by the Lebanese. And so this is why we fundamentally believe in that type of dialogue, and you can count on AFD and the donor community to accompany that dialogue in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Olivier. It's quite inspiring, and really thank you for the reasons of hope. We know them, we see them, but it's good to have somebody else articulate it for us. And for us, you're the reasons for hope. And so hopefully we can work together on this. For the next half hour, we have a coffee break. that will allow you to stretch your legs a little bit. And then we will start sharp in half an hour with the Directors General. And if we can make it in earlier, we can all go out a little bit early. It's 11, we're supposed to start at 11:30, but if we can make it in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, that will be good. So we will call you in 20.